I'm 24/7 Sports Director of Scouting Adam Finkelstein, and you are watching College Basketball Recruiting Weekly. We've got another great show for you this week. It's going to begin with the Coaching Carousel. It's already spinning, and it is set to pick up steam. That's going to lead us to this week's technical foul because we've got something we got to get off our chest. Then we are going to take a look at the players and teams that have the most to gain and potentially lose in the coming weeks as March Madness is upon us. March Madness is not just about the NCAA Tournament. In fact, the madness includes the transfer portal and the coaching carousel. And of course, the coaching carousel also has implications on the recruiting trail and a variety of different arenas within college basketball. So we've already got to start to talk about it. To do that, I'm going to bring in my two colleagues, Bossi and Travis Branham, and we are going to get to the bottom of this coaching carousel. Guys, we're seeing more and more schools that are trying to get ahead of the carousel. Notre Dame was the first one with the decision to, co-announce Mike Brey's departure, not retirement, but departure. So, Ebas, what are you hearing is the latest with the Irish these days?
Yeah, so that's one that hasn't really had a lot of speculation so far. We've heard Chris Holtman's name at Ohio State dropped around. Micah Shrewsbury at Penn State's name has come up. Greg McDermott sure seems like a pipe dream to me. Porter Moser doesn't seem like it's going to work out because of his buyout situation at Oklahoma. So there's a lot of names going around. But let me go ahead and throw out a name that has been semi-linked to the Notre Dame job. But if I was Notre Dame, the guy I would be targeting, that's Darren DeVries at Drake. He just won his second Missouri Valley Conference tournament title, putting the Bulldogs into a tournament for the second time. He's still a pretty young coach in his mid-40s. And he would likely come along with a potential all-conference player in his son, Tucker DeVries, who's a standout there at Drake and just finishing up his sophomore season. He's a guy who's getting it done. He had several years at Creighton as an assistant, knows the land as a recruiting guy, and I think would be a home run hire if they wanted to go that direction.
Yeah, heck of a package deal, too, if you get his son to come with you. Now, Trav, I want to ask you about this. I'm of the opinion that Notre Dame is a pretty good job. You have to be comfortable with the fact that football is king there. But given the resources, given the history, given the conference, I think Notre Dame is a good, desirable job. Is this something that we are going to see or you expect to see a lot of people go for come the offseason?
No question about it. I do think there's a world where Notre Dame is definitely competing for the ACC. It definitely takes its own niche. You can't just recruit the same guys that your opponents in the ACC, like North Carolina or Louisville or even Duke, go after. You got to kind of find the types of players that really fit the program and really kind of take the cream of the crop from that specific type of fit. But they also have a budget. You're talking about a tremendous football school. So you got the resources, you got a fan base, and also you're in Indiana. So you got passionate fans, knowledgeable fans in the area, and also knowledgeable kids that grow up loving the game of basketball and can really we see a lot of talent churn out of the state. So I do see Notre Dame as a desirable job for sure.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. And you know what? You're even close enough. I'm not sure most people realize this. You're a lot closer to Chicago than people think, too. You could potentially tap into that. But Notre Dame, not the only high major school to announce their coaching change early. Of course, Ole Miss, same decision. Kermit Davis, he's moving on. The interesting thing about this one is Ole Miss had a top 20 recruiting class in the country. And Ebas, I'm going to go back to you. You and I both liked the big fella who was committed to them this summer, but they had 4 different players. What goes into that? I know they've kept the staff to try and keep that recruiting class in place, but what are the chances that the next person there can retain that group, and how important is it for them to make a hire sooner rather than later because of it?
Obviously, you want to get it done sooner rather than later because it gets you ahead of the sequence, right? And we've already seen Josh Hubbard and Rashad Marshall, the big guy that you're mentioning. Josh Hubbard's also a top 150 point guard who's from within the state. You know, it's not often that we see these coaches come in and keep things together, but you want them to get a head start on any possible chance of keeping those together. And also now the transfer portal is going to start hitting, and you want to have a new coach with as much time to work on that transfer portal stuff as possible. So getting that opening out in the air earlier and going to work on trying to find some guys, and certainly now they're starting to be linked to a pretty big name guy after maybe initially looking they wouldn't want to go that route. But the earlier the better when it comes to maybe saving somebody in a recruiting class or getting a head start on the portal.
Well, of course, that big name is Chris Beard, who was fired at Texas earlier this year, but has since been, believe the way we should say it, is had all charges dropped against him. What's going to be really interesting, of course, is we have an ongoing situation at Texas Tech where Chris Beard was previously the head coach. Mark Adams recently been put on leave, and people are wondering if Texas Tech could potentially open. So, Trav, this is going to be a big question I'm about to throw at you. Going to give you a couple seconds to prepare for it. Is there any way in which Chris Beard would consider, and I know you're guessing here, a return to Texas Tech, or do you think Ole Miss is potentially more desirable for him?
I do not see him going back to Texas Tech. That family tree right now just isn't necessarily something, especially at Texas Tech, wants to continue kind of divulging into, especially after what happened at Texas. Obviously, charges are dropped, but that's still a big obstacle that like fans are going to have to get over, and boosters and everything else that goes into these decisions. So Ole Miss to me is much more desirable if you are Chris Beard. They do seem to be heavily interested in him. They brought him in for a meeting. Another name we keep hearing pop up surrounding Ole Miss that seems to be Chris Beard's top competition is Dusty May out of Florida Atlantic, having one heck of a season, ranked in the top 25 for much of the latter half of this season. He has SEC experience coming from the University of Florida, and also has an Ole Miss former Rebel on his own staff in Todd Abernathy. So there's a small connection there. Obviously, that's much more besides the point, but just a fun little tidbit. But yeah, Mark Adams doesn't seem to be lasting much longer, and I do not envision Chris Beard being the next head coach there.
All right, now if you are a viewer of this show, you know our What's Got You Teed Up segment is the time when we can get a little something off our chest, something that's bothering us, maybe something that's bothering a viewer. In this case, it's what's bothering one of our producers. Our very own Kenny Williams, one of the many geniuses behind the scenes, is a very proud DMV native, a DeMatha Catholic alum, and a huge Georgetown fan. Now, let me make this very clear. We are not advocating for anyone to get fired here. I have been in those shoes. I have been a Division I coach who's had to lose their job, an assistant coach, but that's the important thing that people don't realize. It's not just the head coach. It's the assistant coaches, the support staffs, and all those families. So hopefully Patrick Ewing can figure out a way to get this right. But Mr. Williams, we know you, the entire DMV region, and the entire Big East Conference are rooting for Georgetown to be the best version of itself, because that is when the DMV and the Big East are at their best. All right, now, with that in mind, going to bring back in Travis and Bossi, and we're going to talk about who could be some of the hot names to potentially be candidates for the bigger jobs. We've already talked about Chris Beard, but who else? Here's the reality, guys. There's going to be a lot of jobs that open this spring. And so there's going to be a lot of names that come up in the rumor mill. Who are some of the names that you think are going to get the most traction? Trav, I'll start with you.
Rick Pitino, we've already seen this play out going back to the month of January. His name's been getting tossed out, and we just talked about Georgetown. That was one specific school that people have been just kind of buzzing about. Obviously, we have yet to see what's going to happen with Georgetown, the Big East tournaments this week, and with what's going to happen with Patrick Ewing. But Rick Pitino is going to be one of the hottest names. And I'm curious with the potential of what could happen at Texas Tech. Let's assume that Mark Adams will be fired. Will they go after a guy like Rick Pitino, somebody that's going to come in and be able to pick up where Chris Beard left off? Mark Adams had them in a good spot. They lost a lot in the transfer portal this season. Has been quite a roller coaster ride. And Rick Pitino can really build off that, and can build off of that. And honestly, he could garner a big paycheck as well through that job. They got a ton of resources. So that would be one that I have an eye on.
You know, I don't know if I've ever told you guys this, but I called Iona games for 6 years. So it was like 3 years of Tim Kluse, and then it was the first couple of years of Rick Pitino, including the COVID year where there was nobody in the building. So it was just like Iona, whoever they were playing, and you could hear everything that he was saying during those games because there were no fans. And he is every bit as good as advertised. And I think he's going to be as successful as we expect no matter where he goes. Because having been around him the last couple of years, I'll tell you this, the energy level has not decreased at all. In fact, I think this is another opportunity that maybe he didn't anticipate a few years ago. Having been cleared of any wrongdoing in that Louisville NCAA scandal, now it's an opportunity for him to once again cement his legacy. And Ebos, I mean, he's as good as advertised, as intense as advertised on the court. And I think he's got a lot of miles left in the tank. Are there any other names that you think could be popular candidates here in the rumor mill?
We're going to see plenty, certainly, but I kind of want to stick with this Rick Pitino thing because I
Fair
think
enough. Yeah.
tip of all of our tongues when it comes to these guys because, you know, he's more or less been openly auditioning or saying that he's available for other jobs in many of his post-game press conferences, many of the things that he's done with the press this year. So I think it's pretty clear that if he can find the right situation, he is going to be on the move. Now, is it going to be one of those places that's being speculated about? You know, there's on top of Georgetown, people are speculating maybe something could happen at St. John's in the Big East. Travis mentioned Texas Tech, and thinking back to our earlier conversation on Texas Tech, could you imagine? I just can't see them going Chris Beard. Imagine after the scene that played out when he returned there with Texas last year, and how much drama there was in him leaving, that guy trying to go back and coach there. So I don't see that happening. But Pitino, there's just so many storylines that go along with him, and I think this is a guy that is desperate to show that he was wronged at Louisville and to leave one last final, like, really positive imprint on his Hall of Fame legacy. And so I think that guy's going to be the big name out there. We're going to see other names. You know, maybe if we're going to talk about other guys that got attached with scandal, you know, Will Wade's name is going to come up with jobs. That guy's going to end up getting a job somewhere. You know, we mentioned Dusty May earlier. I think Florida Atlantic's really trying to keep him, and he may stay in line. Darren DeVries is a guy that I brought up earlier. Now we just got to see what happens in the NCAA tournament. You know, a couple of these mid-major guys are going to win a game or two and become a hot name. Could someone like Paul Mills become a hot name? You know, what assistant is out there? Where's Rodney Terry going to land? Because if he's not promoted at Texas, I would bet that guy ends up a head coach somewhere. So there's going to be a lot of big names out there.
Yeah. All right. Well, I tell you what, this is just getting started, the Coaching Carousel. And like all things, we're going to have you covered on 247sports.com. So be sure to visit us there as well as on the 24/7 Sports channel. Now, of course, March Madness, the Coaching Carousel, they're all connected. You play well in March, you got a chance to get a better job. You disappoint in March, or you disappoint before we even get to March, maybe your seat's going to become a little bit warm. Now, it's time that all three of us identify which team needs a big week, a big month, as March Madness really goes into full swing. So, going to bring back in Eric and Travis, and we are going to break this down. Eric, I will start with you. Which team do you think needs to come up big in the very near future?
I'm going out west, and I'm going with Arizona State. Bobby Hurley's squad, it's been an interesting ride these last couple of weeks. They appeared to be dead in the water for chances for an NCAA tournament bid, and then Desmond Cambridge hits a 60-foot heave at Arizona to kind of put them back in contention. They go last week. They have a tough road swing, losing at USC and UCLA, and so now they've got the Pac-12 tournament coming up, and they're right on that border. Some people have them as one of the last four teams in, one of the first four out. They're right in that 60 to 65 range on both KenPom and net. So they're going to open up the Pac-12 tournament with a game against Oregon State. They absolutely have to win that game. They lose that one, they're done. That sets up a potential quarterfinal matchup with USC. If they can win that and move into the Pac-12 semis, then I think Arizona State's feeling really good. You know, they're going to need DJ Horn to be hitting shots. They're going to need Frankie Collins to be taking care of the ball and spraying it around to the Cambridge brothers. They've got the talent. They've proven they can beat teams. I think a trip to the semifinals of the Pac-12 tournament gets it done for Bobby Hurley and Arizona State.
All right, very good. Trav, I think you are going to Big Ten country. Who do you have who needs a big week coming up?
I am going to Big Ten country. I am going with the Michigan Wolverines here. They had a real chance at getting a big-time win this past weekend against Indiana. Took a 2-point loss. Really hurt their NCAA chances. Right now, they're on the outside of the bubble looking in. They are currently an 8 seed going into the Big Ten tournament. And if they can get a win against Rutgers, they have a chance at taking down the #1 overall seed in Purdue. And I honestly, if they get that matchup, that is one I'm absolutely going to be tuning into. You got two of the best bigs in the entire country. Obviously, Zach Edey is the best player in all of college basketball this year. But Michigan has been starting to figure some things out. They've gotten a great boost out of Kobe Buffkin, a guy who's really come into his own in the second half of this season. You also got another potential lottery pick on this team in Jet Howard. So this team has all the talent. So it's frankly been a bit of a disappointing season for Michigan so far. But they have a chance, and they need to get two potential wins. 3 would get them in for sure.
All right, now, fellas, will probably not surprise you that I'm going to go with North Carolina. Captain Obvious here. I mean, that game at home against Duke, there was a lot on the line, and they did not get it done. I mean, it was straight line drives, given up on the defensive end. It was bad shots on the offensive end. Unfortunately, those are stories we've seen multiple times throughout the course of this season. They came into this season with high hopes after returning basically 90% of the roster that went to the NCAA championship game last year, #1 in a lot of preseason polls, but they have just not gotten it done. And I think so much of that comes down to the lack of chemistry, lack of continuity. It's impacted the overall motor of the team. This is not a team that shares the ball very effectively. They take a lot of tough shots. They basically, it seems like, take turns ISOing and stuff like that. RJ Davis, Caleb Love have never really figured out how to play off one another at the same time. Armando Bacot not nearly as involved as he should be in the offense. So now they head into the NCAA tournament with only 19 wins. And remember, they go into the ACC tournament with only 19 wins. And remember, this is an ACC that is perceived as being a little bit down. So how many games do they have to win in this tournament to get to the big dance? At least 2. Do they have to win the whole thing? I think it's possible. Now, Jerry Palm has them as one of the first 4 out, but that in and of itself will change when some Cinderellas get into the tournament unexpectedly. So North Carolina has got a lot of work to do. Otherwise, it is going to be the type of narrative that Hubert Davis is not going to want to hear. All right, now for more on these teams, check out the tournament resumes here, not just of the 3 teams we've discussed, but of others who are hoping to hear their name called on Selection Sunday. Now, March Madness, it's also relevant for the NBA draft. You see how all these things kind of play off one another? So this week's Draftable Spotlight is based on some players who could really improve their stocks in the coming weeks. Now, we saw it last year, guys like Paolo Banchero, Benedict Mathurin, Ochai Agbaji, winning the NCAA tournament, getting himself into the first round along with Christian Brown. Those guys all helped themselves. Frankly, the reason is because whether it's recency bias or whatever the case may be, this is an efficient evaluation setting for NBA scouts who can go to conference tournaments, they can go to the NCAA tournament, and they can sit in one place all day long and see multiple top teams and multiple top players. So it is a big opportunity for these players to make one last impression in their college career. So to preview some players who may be able to make a big impression on their way out of college basketball, I will go back to my 2 colleagues. Travis, I will start with you. Who do you think could really help themselves here this week, this month?
This person could really help themselves, but they also really need to help themselves. And the person that I am referring to is Gigi Jackson. The SEC tournament tips off on Wednesday, and Gigi Jackson's season has been a roller coaster, for lack of a better term. He came out of high school as the #1 prospect in the 2023 class, obviously reclassifying to 2022, where he ranked inside the top 10. He's the youngest player in this draft, with the birthday that just made him eligible for the 2023 NBA draft. So being one of the most young, or one of the youngest players, mixed in with being one of the most talented prospects in this class, his season has been very bumpy, and it's been marked by some immature moments, especially going online. We've talked about it on here, and airing out a lot of dirty laundry. And so NBA teams have not been necessarily excited about Gigi Jackson's year. So he has to go out into this SEC tournament and leave out on a positive note.
And you know what? I've got a very similar freshman that I want to talk about, and that's Dariq Whitehead, the prospect who finished #3 in our 24/7 rankings last year. He was even higher on other outlets. In fact, he finished second overall in the 24/7 Sports Composite. But because of a couple different injuries, as well as what I'm told was a stomach bug in the midst of one of those comebacks, we have just not seen the best basketball that Dariq Whitehead is capable of playing. Frankly, we haven't seen anything close to it. As you said about Gigi Jackson, we've also talked about Dariq Whitehead here. I've been, I praised him for his willingness to come back and play when he's not 100%, to put the team ahead of his individual draft stock. But the bottom line is this, is that his draft stock has suffered over the course of this season. And he has, as you said, Travis, he has an opportunity, a chance to kind of change that narrative a little bit. If he can find some of his old form, have a big game or two in March, it can remind NBA scouts of what they saw in high school, what that high school tape looked like. And I think that could go a long way to really helping to revitalize his NBA stock. Now, Ebos, I know you're not going to the freshmen, so I'm going to end with you here. Who do you think could really help themselves down the stretch of March?
I'm going to go with the guy that I think actually has the best chance of playing a lot of games during the month of March and really getting to see things. Gigi, man, he may only get one shot. Duke, they're kind of up and down. You don't know. But I'm going with Jalen Wilson at Kansas. And I'm not saying Kansas is going to win the national championship again this year, but they're going to play at least a couple games in the Big 12 tournament. And it would be a shock to not see them make it fairly deep in the NCAA tournament as potentially a number 1 seed. Last year, you saw Christian Brown went into the NCAA tournament as a borderline first-round pick. Jalen Wilson, really not even borderline first-round right now. The Big 12 Player of the Year is being mocked mostly in the mid-second round of things, but he's a guy that's led Kansas in rebounding all 3 years that he's played, after suffering an injury his freshman year. He's become a solid scorer. Now, what he can show during the NCAA tournament is that he can be a more efficient scorer. He's only shot the ball from 3 at around 32% during his career. He's a lower 40-ish percentage shooter as kind of a 6'7", 6'8" combo forward. But the guy's a leader on the floor. He's a winner. He's a competitor. And the more games that he gets to play in those highly competitive settings, and just how much he competes and how much he helps makes guys around him better, is really going to help him out with the NBA. And I think it could potentially push him towards the end of the first round if he plays things right.
Well, we saw a pair of Kansas players do that last year. Could be another case this year. I think that's a great point. Fellas, thank you as always for joining us. We will see you again next week. And you can see more on those 3 players behind me, the breakdown of 3 prospects who could really help themselves in the upcoming month of March Madness. Well, that's it for this week's episode of College Basketball Recruiting Weekly. We will be back with you in 1 week, but between now and then, visit 247sports.com. Remember, it's one-stop shopping for college basketball recruiting, and the NBA draft. And of course, you can also visit us on the 24/7 Sports channel, which is where you will find all other episodes of this show.